Dr. Elena Vasquez had been studying the strange electromagnetic pulses for 3 months when the first ship appeared over Geneva. The patterns in the data made no sense according to conventional physics, yet there they were, repeating every 3 seconds with mathematical precision that suggested intelligence. What she didn't know was that those pulses were the equivalent of alien breath, the involuntary neural emissions of beings whose consciousness operated on frequencies that human science had barely begun to detect. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Commander Vel'Tar adjusted the neural dampeners on his observation platform as Earth's yellow sun crested the horizon over what the inhabitants called Europe. His species, the Vel'Tar, had evolved on a world where mental energy was as tangible as physical matter, where thoughts could reshape reality, and consciousness itself was a measurable force. They had spent the last solar cycle monitoring this primitive world, fascinated by readings that defied everything they understood about sapient development. The humans, according to every scanner aboard the research vessel Mindful Wanderer, were operating at cognitive levels that barely registered on Vel'Tar measurement scales. Their brain activity showed the minimal patterns associated with basic survival functions, simple tool use, and rudimentary social coordination. By Vel'Tar standards, they were barely conscious at all. Commander Vel'Tar's primary researcher, Dr. Nithvel, floated beside him in the observation chamber. Her consciousness partially extended beyond her physical form as she monitored the neural resonance patterns emanating from the planet below. The Vel'Tar had long ago transcended the limitations of purely biological existence, their minds capable of expanding across space and time, manipulating matter through focused intention, and accessing what they termed the universal consciousness field. The humans showed none of these capabilities. Their neural emissions registered at barely 2% of what the Vel'Tar considered baseline sapient activity. Most concerning was their apparent complete ignorance of their own mental potential. Scans indicated they were unaware that consciousness could extend beyond their physical brains, that thought itself could be weaponized, that mental energy could be harvested and redirected to accomplish feats that would seem miraculous to primitive species. Professor Michael Chen walked across the Harvard University campus, his mind occupied with a lecture he would deliver in 20 minutes about quantum consciousness theory. His research into the relationship between human awareness and quantum field fluctuations had led him to propose that consciousness might be far more powerful than anyone imagined. But his colleagues remained skeptical. The peer review process had been brutal, with established neuroscientists dismissing his work as pseudoscience. Chen had no way of knowing that alien sensors were analyzing his neural patterns at that very moment, detecting quantum field disturbances around his brain that registered as significant energy signatures on Vel'Tar instruments. To Dr. Nithvel, monitoring from millions of miles above, Chen's thought patterns showed the faintest glimmer of what she recognized as proto-consciousness expansion, though the human seemed completely unaware of the mental forces he was unconsciously manipulating. The Vel'Tar had discovered Earth through routine deep space surveys designed to catalog primitive civilizations that might eventually evolve into consciousness-capable species. Their initial reports classified humans as a basic bipedal species, with rudimentary tool-making abilities and simple communication systems. The neural scanning data suggested they were operating at consciousness levels barely sufficient for complex problem-solving, let alone the kind of mental evolution that marked truly advanced civilizations. Dr. Sarah Kim sat in her meditation retreat center in the mountains of Tibet, guiding a group of international students through breathing exercises designed to quiet the mind and enhance awareness. She had spent 15 years studying contemplative practices from various traditions, developing techniques that seemed to produce measurable changes in brain activity and even physical healing. Her students often reported experiences that transcended normal consciousness, moments of profound connection to something larger than themselves. From the Vel'Tar research vessel, these meditation sessions appeared as tiny sparks of increased neural activity, brief moments when human brain patterns approached 3% of baseline consciousness levels. Dr. Nithvel noted these fluctuations with academic interest, filing them under anomalous readings that didn't significantly alter the overall assessment of human mental capacity. Commander Vel'Tar reviewed the compilation of data his research team had gathered over their monitoring period. The humans had built a technological civilization without developing any consciousness-based abilities whatsoever. They had created devices to extend their physical capabilities, but showed no sign of understanding that their minds possessed untapped potential that could accomplish far more than any mechanical tool. Their cities sprawled across the planet's surface in patterns that showed intelligent planning, yet the neural emissions from those population centers barely registered on Vel'Tar detection equipment. Millions of humans could gather in a single location and collectively produce less mental energy than a single Vel'Tar child during basic consciousness training. Dr. James Wright led his research team through another series of experiments at the Institute for Consciousness Studies in California, using advanced brain imaging technology to study individuals who claimed extraordinary mental abilities. His subjects included people who demonstrated unusual pattern recognition skills, others who seemed capable of influencing random number generators through focused intention, and a few who showed remarkable healing abilities that defied medical explanation. The experimental results were consistently frustrating. While the brain scans showed increased activity in specific regions during these demonstrations, the effects were subtle and difficult to replicate under controlled conditions. Wright's team had published several papers suggesting that human consciousness might possess capabilities beyond current scientific understanding, but the academic community remained largely unconvinced. The Vel'Tar sensors monitoring Wright's laboratory detected energy fluctuations that were invisible to human instruments. When his subjects focused their attention with particular intensity, localized distortions appeared in what the Vel'Tar recognized as the quantum consciousness field. These distortions were microscopic by Vel'Tar standards, barely registering as measurable phenomena, but they represented something unprecedented in the alien researchers' experience of primitive species. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez walked through the halls of the Neurological Rehabilitation Center, where she worked with patients recovering from traumatic brain injuries. Her treatment protocols included conventional therapy combined with experimental techniques that seemed to help patients access cognitive abilities that medical science suggested should have been permanently lost. Some of her patients had relearned complex skills with remarkable speed, while others had developed new capabilities that exceeded their pre-injury levels. Rodriguez attributed these improvements to neuroplasticity and the brain's ability to reorganize itself around damaged areas. She had no way of knowing that her patients were unconsciously tapping into what the Vel'Tar termed auxiliary consciousness matrices, backup neural networks that existed in quantum superposition until activated by specific mental training protocols. The Vel'Tar had evolved these auxiliary consciousness systems over millions of years, developing the ability to maintain multiple streams of awareness simultaneously and to access alternate mental configurations when primary consciousness pathways were compromised. The fact that humans possessed similar systems, even in rudimentary form, was puzzling to the alien researchers who had classified them as a barely conscious species. Chief Research Officer Vel'Tar materialized beside Commander Zethka in the observation chamber, her consciousness coalescing from its distributed monitoring state to share her latest findings. The Vel'Tar communicated through direct mental transfer, sharing complete conceptual frameworks in moments that would have required hours of verbal explanation for species limited to sequential information processing. The data Vel'Tar transmitted was disturbing. While human baseline consciousness remained at the minimal levels they had initially measured, isolated individuals occasionally produced neural patterns that suggested much greater potential. These anomalies were rare and brief, occurring in less than 1% of the population and lasting for only short periods, but they indicated capabilities that shouldn't exist in primitive minds. Dr. Patricia Lee stood before her physics class at MIT, explaining the latest theories about quantum field interactions and the possibility that consciousness might play a fundamental role in shaping reality at the quantum level. Her students struggled with concepts that challenged their understanding of the relationship between mind and matter, but a few seemed to grasp the implications of what she was suggesting. Lee had spent her career studying the intersection of quantum mechanics and consciousness theory, developing mathematical models that suggested observation and intention might have measurable effects on quantum systems. Her work remained highly theoretical, but recent experiments had begun to produce results that supported her hypotheses about the active role of consciousness in quantum field dynamics. The Vel'Tar monitoring equipment detected subtle alterations in local space-time geometry whenever Lee explained her theories with particular clarity and passion. These alterations were barely measurable by Vel'Tar standards, but they represented the kind of reality manipulation that marked the beginning of true consciousness evolution. The fact that a primitive human could unconsciously influence fundamental forces while simply teaching suggested hidden capabilities that their initial assessment had completely missed. Dr. Robert Kim worked late in his laboratory at the National Institute of Mental Health, analyzing brain scan data from subjects who had undergone intensive meditation training. The neuroimaging results showed structural changes in brain tissue that occurred far more rapidly than current theories of neuroplasticity could explain. Some subjects had developed new neural pathways within weeks of beginning their training, pathways that seemed to connect previously isolated brain regions in unprecedented configurations. Kim's research suggested that human consciousness might be far more malleable than anyone had imagined, capable of rapid evolution under the right conditions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. His subjects reported enhanced creativity, improved problem-solving abilities, and occasional experiences that transcended normal sensory perception. While these reports were subjective and difficult to verify scientifically, the objective brain imaging data confirmed that something remarkable was happening in their neural architecture. From the Vel'Tar research vessel, Kim's subjects appeared as individuals whose consciousness patterns occasionally approached 4% of baseline sapient levels during their most intensive meditation sessions. These brief spikes of mental activity were accompanied by quantum field fluctuations that indicated rudimentary consciousness expansion, though the humans seemed unaware of the mental forces they were unconsciously accessing. Commander Zethka found himself increasingly puzzled by the contradiction between human technological achievement and their apparent mental limitations. The species had developed space travel, global communication networks, and sophisticated manufacturing systems without ever discovering the consciousness-based technologies that formed the foundation of all truly advanced civilizations. They had built their entire society around external tools and mechanical devices, completely bypassing the mental capabilities that could have made such crude technologies unnecessary. The Vel'Tar had long ago abandoned physical technology in favor of consciousness-based manipulation of matter and energy. They could travel across vast distances by extending their awareness through space, manipulate molecular structures through focused intention, and access information from the universal consciousness field that connected all sapient minds. The idea that an intelligent species could develop complex societies without discovering these fundamental capabilities was almost incomprehensible. Dr. Amanda Foster reviewed her latest research on collective consciousness phenomena at her laboratory in the Consciousness Research Institute. Her studies of group meditation sessions, religious gatherings, and other collective mental activities had revealed intriguing patterns in electromagnetic field measurements taken during these events. When large groups of people focused their attention in similar ways, sensitive instruments detected field fluctuations that seemed to extend far beyond what individual brain activity could account for. Foster's work suggested that human consciousness might possess collective properties that mainstream neuroscience hadn't recognized. Her data indicated that groups of people could somehow synchronize their mental activity in ways that produced measurable effects on their environment, though the mechanisms responsible for these phenomena remained completely unknown. The Vel'Tar sensors monitoring Foster's research detected something that made Dr. Nithvel's consciousness recoil in surprise. When humans gathered in groups and synchronized their mental activity, they unconsciously accessed what the Vel'Tar recognized as collective consciousness fields. These fields were weak and poorly coordinated compared to Vel'Tar group mind capabilities, but they represented a level of mental evolution that shouldn't have been possible for a species operating at 2% consciousness levels. Dr. Thomas Park walked through the corridors of the International Space Station, conducting experiments on the effects of low gravity on human cognitive function. His research had revealed unexpected findings about how the absence of gravitational stress seemed to enhance certain mental capabilities. Astronauts reported improved pattern recognition, enhanced intuitive problem-solving abilities, and occasional experiences of expanded awareness that were difficult to describe in conventional terms. Park's brain imaging studies of long-duration space travelers showed neural activity patterns that differed significantly from Earth-based controls. The changes appeared to be beneficial, suggesting that human consciousness might function more efficiently when freed from certain environmental constraints. Some astronauts had developed almost uncanny abilities to predict equipment failures before diagnostic systems detected problems, as if they were unconsciously accessing information through channels that conventional science couldn't explain. From the perspective of Vel'Tar monitoring systems, humans in space showed neural emissions that occasionally reached 5% of baseline consciousness levels. The reduced gravitational field seemed to allow their minds to access capabilities that remained dormant under normal planetary conditions. This finding suggested that human consciousness potential might be artificially constrained by environmental factors rather than fundamental biological limitations. Research director Keith Moore joined the observation team as they reviewed the growing collection of anomalous data. As the Vel'Tar's leading expert on consciousness evolution, Keith Moore had studied the mental development patterns of dozens of species across the galaxy. The human readings violated every established principle of sapient development that the Vel'Tar had documented over millions of years of research. The data suggested that humans possessed the neural architecture necessary for advanced consciousness capabilities, but were somehow prevented from accessing more than a tiny fraction of their mental potential. The pattern was unprecedented in Vel'Tar records of primitive species. Most developing civilizations showed steady progression from basic awareness to expanded consciousness as their neural complexity increased. Humans appeared to have developed the neural complexity without the corresponding consciousness expansion. Dr. Helen Chang worked in her private practice as a clinical psychologist, specializing in patients who reported unusual mental experiences that didn't fit conventional diagnostic categories. Her clients included individuals who claimed telepathic abilities, others who seemed capable of influencing electronic devices through mental concentration, and people who reported precognitive dreams that proved remarkably accurate. Chang had developed therapeutic techniques that helped her patients integrate these experiences rather than suppress them as symptoms of mental illness. Her approach was controversial within the psychiatric community, but her success rates with difficult cases had earned her a reputation as an effective therapist for individuals whose experiences challenged mainstream understanding of human psychological capabilities. The Vel'Tar monitoring equipment detected unusual neural activity patterns in Chang's patients that suggested rudimentary development of what the aliens recognized as extended consciousness capabilities. These abilities were inconsistent and poorly controlled, but they represented genuine expansion beyond normal human consciousness levels. The fact that these individuals were often labeled as mentally ill by their own species indicated that humans were systematically suppressing their own consciousness evolution. Dr. Mark Stevens led his anthropology team through a study of ancient human cultures, focusing on traditions that claimed to enhance human mental capabilities through specific practices and training techniques. His research had uncovered remarkable consistency across diverse civilizations in their descriptions of advanced mental states that could be achieved through disciplined practice. From Tibetan meditation traditions to Native American vision quests to ancient Greek mystery schools, human cultures had independently developed methods for expanding consciousness beyond normal levels. Stevens found it puzzling that these ancient knowledge systems had been largely abandoned by modern civilization in favor of external technological development. The historical records suggested that previous human cultures had achieved mental capabilities that contemporary humans considered mythological, including enhanced healing abilities, expanded sensory perception, and direct mind-to-mind communication. From the Vel'Tar research vessel, Stevens' studies of ancient human practices revealed something that shocked the alien researchers. The historical descriptions matched known consciousness development techniques that the Vel'Tar had discovered during their own species' evolution millions of years earlier. Humans had apparently developed advanced consciousness training methods independently, then somehow forgotten or abandoned them during their transition to technological civilization. Commander Zeth-Ka convened his senior research staff to review the mounting evidence that their initial assessment of human consciousness levels might have been fundamentally flawed. The data now suggested that humans weren't operating at 2% of baseline consciousness because of biological limitations, but because they had somehow suppressed or forgotten capabilities that they had once possessed. The implications were staggering. If humans were capable of consciousness expansion but had simply failed to develop it, they represented a unique phenomenon in the Vel'Tar's extensive records of galactic civilizations. No other species had ever abandoned consciousness development in favor of purely technological advancement. Most civilizations that focused exclusively on external tools eventually stagnated and declined, while those that developed consciousness-based capabilities continued evolving toward higher levels of awareness and ability. Dr. Karen White studied the intersection of consciousness and quantum physics at her research facility in Switzerland, conducting experiments that seemed to demonstrate direct mental influence on quantum systems. Her laboratory contained some of the most sensitive measurement equipment on Earth, designed to detect the subtlest interactions between conscious observation and quantum field fluctuations. White's experiments consistently showed that trained subjects could influence the behavior of quantum systems through focused mental attention in ways that violated conventional understanding of the relationship between mind and matter. The effects were small but statistically significant, suggesting that consciousness might play a more active role in physical reality than mainstream science acknowledged. The Vel'Tar sensors monitoring White's laboratory detected quantum field manipulations that were invisible to human instruments, but clearly recognizable as primitive consciousness-based reality alteration. The humans were unconsciously accessing abilities that formed the foundation of advanced Vel'Tar technology, though they seemed unaware of what they were accomplishing and unable to control or enhance their capabilities systematically. Dr. Paul Martinez worked with a team of researchers studying the potential for human consciousness to access information through non-local means. Their experiments involved subjects attempting to perceive details about distant locations or future events through mental focus alone. While the results were often dismissed by skeptical colleagues, the data showed success rates that exceeded statistical probability by significant margins. Martinez had developed protocols that seemed to enhance these abilities in certain individuals, though the mechanisms remained completely mysterious. His subjects reported entering altered states of consciousness during successful trials, describing experiences of expanded awareness that allowed them to perceive information beyond the reach of normal sensory channels. From the perspective of Vel'Tar consciousness research, Martinez's subjects were demonstrating rudimentary access to what the aliens called the universal information field, a quantum consciousness matrix that connected all aware beings across space and time. The fact that primitive humans could access this field, even in limited ways, suggested consciousness capabilities that their initial species assessment had completely overlooked. The growing collection of anomalous data forced the Vel'Tar research team to confront an unprecedented possibility. Rather than studying a primitive species with minimal consciousness capabilities, they might have discovered a civilization that had somehow suppressed or forgotten advanced mental abilities that rivaled their own species' ancient developmental stages. Chief researcher Vel'Tar shared her analysis with the observation team through direct consciousness transfer. Her investigation of human historical records suggested that ancient human cultures had possessed knowledge of consciousness expansion techniques that were remarkably sophisticated. These traditions had apparently been systematically abandoned or suppressed during the development of technological civilization, leaving most humans completely unaware of their mental potential. The pattern was unique in Vel'Tar records of galactic civilizations. While some species had experienced temporary setbacks in consciousness development, none had ever deliberately abandoned advanced mental capabilities in favor of external technology. The human case represented either an unprecedented evolutionary choice or the result of some unknown factor that had interrupted their natural consciousness development. Dr. Jennifer Kim studied cases of individuals who had demonstrated remarkable abilities under extreme circumstances, situations where normal human limitations seemed to temporarily disappear. Her research included people who had displayed superhuman strength during emergencies, others who had survived conditions that should have been fatal, and individuals who had demonstrated enhanced mental capabilities during near-death experiences. Kim's data suggested that humans possessed latent abilities that could be activated by specific conditions, though these capabilities usually remained dormant during normal circumstances. The temporary nature of these enhancements implied that the underlying potential was always present but somehow suppressed or inaccessible during routine conscious states. The Vel'Tar monitoring systems detected massive spikes in consciousness activity during the emergency situations Kim studied. When humans faced life-threatening circumstances, their neural patterns sometimes approached 10% of baseline consciousness levels, accompanied by reality manipulation effects that allowed them to accomplish physically impossible feats. These crisis-activated capabilities suggested that human consciousness potential was far greater than their normal functioning indicated. Research director Keith Moore began developing a radical new hypothesis about human consciousness development. The evidence suggested that humans possessed the neural architecture necessary for advanced mental capabilities, but were somehow prevented from accessing more than a fraction of their potential. This suppression might be environmental, cultural, or the result of some unknown evolutionary factor that had diverted their development away from consciousness expansion. The implications were profound. If humans could be taught to access their full consciousness potential, they might rapidly evolve into a civilization that rivaled the most advanced species the Vel'Tar had encountered. The fact that they had achieved technological sophistication while operating at such reduced consciousness levels suggested remarkable underlying capabilities that remained almost entirely untapped. Dr. Nancy Clark worked with a research team studying the effects of various consciousness-altering techniques on human mental performance. Their experiments included meditation training, sensory deprivation, controlled breathing exercises, and other methods that seemed to enhance cognitive abilities and expand awareness beyond normal levels. The results consistently showed that humans could achieve significantly enhanced mental capabilities through specific training protocols. Clark's team had documented improvements in creativity, problem-solving ability, memory function, and intuitive perception among subjects who underwent intensive consciousness training. Some individuals had developed abilities that bordered on what might be called psychic phenomena, though the researchers preferred to describe their findings in terms of enhanced cognitive functioning rather than supernatural capabilities. From the Vel'Tar research vessel, Clark's subjects appeared as individuals whose consciousness patterns could reach 15% of baseline sapient levels during their most advanced training sessions. These enhanced states were accompanied by quantum field manipulations that indicated genuine consciousness expansion, though the humans seemed unable to maintain these levels without intensive effort and specialized techniques. Commander Zethka realized that his research mission had uncovered something far more significant than a simple primitive species survey. The humans represented a unique evolutionary puzzle that challenged fundamental assumptions about consciousness development and species advancement. Their case suggested that consciousness potential might be far more universal than previously understood, existing even in species that appeared to be operating at minimal awareness levels. The discovery had implications that extended far beyond academic interest. If the Vel'Tar's understanding of consciousness development was incomplete, there might be other species throughout the galaxy whose mental potential had been similarly underestimated. The human case suggested that consciousness capabilities might be latent in many civilizations that appeared primitive according to conventional assessment criteria. Dr. David Wong studied the relationship between human consciousness and electromagnetic field interactions, conducting experiments that revealed correlations between mental states and measurable electromagnetic effects. His research suggested that focused attention could influence local electromagnetic fields in ways that seemed to violate conventional physics, though the mechanisms responsible remained completely unknown. Wong's subjects could apparently generate electromagnetic effects through mental concentration alone, producing field variations that were detectable by sensitive instruments but couldn't be explained by any known biological processes. The implications suggested that human consciousness might interface with electromagnetic phenomena through channels that conventional science hadn't recognized. The Vel'Tar sensors detected electromagnetic field manipulations during Wong's experiments that indicated rudimentary mastery of what the aliens called conscious field modulation, a basic consciousness-based technology that the Vel'Tar had developed early in their species' evolution. The fact that humans could unconsciously access these capabilities suggested mental potential that was far more sophisticated than their primitive appearance indicated. As the Vel'Tar research team compiled their findings, they faced the possibility that their entire understanding of human civilization would need to be revised. Rather than a primitive species with minimal consciousness capabilities, the humans appeared to be an advanced, consciousness-capable species that had somehow forgotten or suppressed their own mental potential. The pattern was unprecedented and deeply puzzling. The evidence suggested that humans possessed the neural architecture and consciousness potential necessary for mental capabilities that rivaled those of the most advanced galactic civilizations, but were somehow prevented from accessing more than a tiny fraction of their true potential. The mystery of why this suppression had occurred, and whether it could be reversed, would require investigation far beyond the scope of their current research mission. Commander Zethka prepared to transmit his preliminary findings to the Vel'Tar High Council, knowing that his report would challenge fundamental assumptions about consciousness development and species classification. The humans had proven to be far more than they appeared, and the implications of that discovery would ripple through Vel'Tar civilization for generations to come. The sleeping giants of Earth remained unaware of their own potential, but the Vel'Tar had glimpsed the vast capabilities that lay dormant within human consciousness. The question that would shape future contact between their species was simple yet profound. What would happen if humans learned to access the other 98% of their mental abilities? The answer to that question would determine whether humanity's future lay in continued technological development or in consciousness evolution that could transform them into something far beyond what either species could currently imagine. The first phase of the investigation was complete, but the real mystery was just beginning to unfold. Dr. Maya Patel stepped into the underground chamber beneath the Himalayan research facility, unaware that her footsteps were being tracked by sensors more advanced than anything Earth's technology could detect. The crystalline formations surrounding her had been discovered 3 weeks ago during routine geological surveys, but their properties defied every known law of physics. When exposed to focused human attention, the crystals resonated with frequencies that registered on equipment designed to measure quantum field fluctuations. Commander Zethka materialized fully in the observation deck of the Mindful Wanderer, his consciousness condensing from its distributed monitoring state as emergency alerts flooded through the ship's neural networks. The readings streaming in from Earth's surface were impossible, according to every model of consciousness development the Vel'Tar had established over millions of years of galactic exploration. The humans weren't just occasionally accessing greater consciousness potential, they were beginning to awaken. Dr. Patel placed her hand against the largest crystal formation and felt the familiar tingling sensation that accompanied her meditation sessions. The geological team had dismissed these sensations as static electricity or mild electromagnetic effects, but Patel recognized something deeper. The crystals seemed to respond to her thoughts, their luminescence intensifying whenever she focused her attention with particular clarity. Research Director Keth Moore's consciousness expanded across multiple monitoring stations as data flooded in from sites around the globe. Similar crystalline formations were manifesting spontaneously in caves, deep ocean trenches, and underground chambers on every continent. Each formation showed identical properties. They amplified human consciousness when individuals made direct contact, boosting neural activity to levels that approached 30% of baseline Vel'Tar measurements. The crystals weren't natural geological formations. They were consciousness-focusing arrays, quantum structures that the universal field manifested when sapient species approached critical evolution thresholds. Keth Moore had seen them appear only twice before in the Vel'Tar's extensive records, both times preceding consciousness revolutions that transformed entire civilizations within single generations. Dr. Rachel Morgan stood in her laboratory at the Geneva Particle Accelerator, watching in amazement as test subjects demonstrated abilities that shouldn't have been possible for unaugmented human consciousness. The participants in her consciousness expansion experiments were now capable of influencing particle behavior at the quantum level through mental intention alone, creating coherent patterns in subatomic interactions that required sophisticated machinery for other researchers to achieve. The implications were staggering. If humans could consciously manipulate quantum systems, they possessed capabilities that bridged the gap between mind and matter in ways that conventional science had never imagined possible. Morgan's equipment registered field effects during successful trials that suggested her subjects were accessing some kind of underlying information matrix that connected all physical phenomena. Chief Research Officer Vel'Tar transmitted urgent status updates to the Vel'Tar High Council as she monitored the accelerating pace of human consciousness development. The awakening was happening faster than any documented case in galactic history. Humans who had shown minimal consciousness activity only days before were now demonstrating capabilities that typically required centuries of evolutionary development. The pattern suggested that human consciousness hadn't evolved gradually over time. Instead, it appeared to have been held in suspended animation until specific conditions triggered a rapid expansion process. The crystalline formations were catalysts, but they were activating potential that had been present all along, waiting for the right combination of circumstances to manifest. Dr. Kevin Walsh led his research team through the newly discovered chamber system beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. The tunnels extended for miles in geometric patterns that showed clear signs of intelligent design, though dating techniques suggested they were far older than human civilization. Most remarkably, the walls were lined with the same crystalline structures that had been appearing worldwide, but these formations showed signs of having been active for thousands of years. Walsh's team found evidence that ancient human visitors had used these chambers for purposes that remained mysterious. Artifacts scattered throughout the tunnels included stone tablets covered with symbols that seemed to describe consciousness expansion techniques, alongside technological diagrams that depicted devices far beyond current human manufacturing capabilities. The Vel'Tar monitoring systems detected massive consciousness resonance patterns emanating from the Antarctic site. The ancient chambers were designed as consciousness amplification facilities, quantum resonance chambers, that could boost human mental capabilities to levels that approached full sapient awareness. The discovery suggested that previous human civilizations had achieved advanced consciousness development, then somehow lost access to these capabilities over time. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked frantically in her Mexico City laboratory as her research subjects began demonstrating capabilities that challenged everything she thought she knew about human potential. Individuals who had participated in her consciousness studies for months were now showing neural activity patterns that registered as impossible on conventional brain imaging equipment. Her subjects could perceive information from distant locations through mental focus alone, influence electronic devices without physical contact, and demonstrate healing abilities that accelerated tissue regeneration beyond normal biological rates. Most remarkably, they seemed able to communicate directly mind to mind when working together, sharing complex concepts without spoken or written language. Rodriguez documented everything with desperate precision, knowing that the scientific community would dismiss her findings as fraud or delusion unless she could provide overwhelming evidence. The data showed that human consciousness was capable of expansion far beyond anything previously documented, but the mechanisms responsible remained completely unknown to Earth's scientific understanding. From the Vel'Tar research vessel, Rodriguez's subjects appeared as individuals whose consciousness patterns had suddenly expanded to 50% of baseline sapient levels. The acceleration was unprecedented. Consciousness development that should have taken evolutionary epochs was happening within days or weeks, as humans learned to access mental capabilities they had never known they possessed. Dr. Jonathan Kim discovered that the consciousness expansion wasn't limited to his research subjects. People throughout Seoul were beginning to report unusual experiences that suggested widespread mental enhancement. Emergency rooms received increasing numbers of patients who claimed to be experiencing telepathic episodes, spontaneous healing events, or visions of distant locations that proved to be accurate. Kim's investigation revealed that the phenomena were clustering around specific geographic locations where underground crystalline formations had been detected. The crystals seemed to create fields of enhanced consciousness that affected everyone within a certain radius, regardless of their previous exposure to consciousness training or mental development practices. The implication suggested that human consciousness expansion was entering a collective phase. Rather than isolated individuals developing enhanced capabilities, entire populations were beginning to access greater mental potential simultaneously. The pattern matched theoretical models of species-wide consciousness evolution that the Vel'Tar had never actually observed in real time. Commander Zethka faced a decision that would reshape the Vel'Tar's relationship with emerging sapient species throughout the galaxy. The human consciousness expansion was happening so rapidly that intervention might be necessary to prevent catastrophic disruption of their civilization. Species that awakened too quickly often suffered social collapse, as their reality frameworks couldn't adapt to radically enhanced mental capabilities. The Vel'Tar had protocols for guiding consciousness evolution in primitive species, but those procedures assumed gradual development over thousands of years. The human awakening was compressing that timeline into months or possibly weeks, creating unprecedented challenges for both species involved in the contact process. Dr. Priya Singh led her team through emergency protocols at the Consciousness Research Facility in Mumbai as their test subjects began demonstrating capabilities that bordered on what previous generations would have called miraculous. Individuals were healing severe injuries through focused intention, manipulating electromagnetic fields with sufficient precision to power electronic devices, and accessing information from sources that couldn't be identified through conventional means. Singh's data indicated that the consciousness expansion was accelerating exponentially. Subjects who had achieved 30% enhancement on Monday were reaching 60% by Friday, with no apparent upper limit to their development trajectory. If the progression continued at current rates, some individuals might achieve consciousness levels that rivaled the most advanced galactic civilizations within months. The Vel'Tar sensors detected quantum field manipulations around Singh's facility that indicated reality alteration capabilities approaching Vel'Tar technological levels. The humans were unconsciously developing abilities that the aliens had spent millions of years perfecting through deliberate consciousness evolution. The acceleration suggested that human consciousness potential was even greater than the Vel'Tar had initially estimated. Dr. Lisa Chen worked around the clock to document the transformation happening at the Australian Consciousness Research Centre. Her subjects had begun demonstrating group consciousness capabilities that allowed them to coordinate mental activities across vast distances. Teams of individuals could combine their enhanced awareness to accomplish feats that exceeded what any single person could achieve alone. The group consciousness effects suggested that humans were developing collective mental capabilities similar to those that defined advanced Vel'Tar civilization. When working together, enhanced humans could access the universal information field with clarity that allowed them to perceive events across space and time, manipulate matter at the molecular level, and share knowledge directly between minds without technological mediation. Chen's research indicated that the group consciousness effects weren't limited to trained subjects. People throughout the region were beginning to experience spontaneous mental connections with others, sharing emotions, thoughts, and even sensory experiences across distances that shouldn't have allowed such contact through any known mechanism. Research director Keth Moore transmitted emergency assessments to the Vel'Tar High Council as the scope of human consciousness evolution became clear. The species wasn't just awakening individual mental capabilities. They were developing collective consciousness integration that could transform their entire civilization within a single generation. The pattern matched theoretical models of species transcendence that the Vel'Tar had never witnessed in reality. If the human development continued at current rates, they might achieve consciousness levels that exceeded even Vel'Tar capabilities within years, rather than evolutionary epochs. The transformation represented either the most remarkable case of consciousness evolution in galactic history or a catastrophic mistake that could destabilize multiple star systems. Dr. Marcus Thompson documented the reality alteration events occurring at the Consciousness Laboratory in London, as his research subjects began manipulating physical matter through mental intention alone. Enhanced individuals could alter molecular structures by focusing their awareness on specific targets, essentially rewriting the laws of physics through conscious will applied at the quantum level. Thompson's equipment registered field effects during successful reality alteration attempts that indicated direct interface between human consciousness and the fundamental forces that governed matter and energy. The implications suggested that consciousness itself might be a force of nature equivalent to gravity or electromagnetism, capable of reshaping reality when applied with sufficient focus and understanding. The demonstrations progressed from simple molecular alterations to more complex manipulations that allowed subjects to transmute elements, generate energy from quantum vacuum fluctuations, and create stable matter configurations that shouldn't have been possible, according to conventional physics. The enhanced humans were accessing abilities that the Vel'Tar considered advanced technological capabilities. Chief Research Officer Vel-9 faced the unprecedented situation of monitoring a species whose consciousness development was outpacing their own theoretical models. The human enhancement was happening so rapidly that prediction became impossible. Capabilities that emerged on Monday were superseded by greater abilities by Wednesday, with no apparent limit to the acceleration. The enhanced humans were beginning to notice the Vel'Tar monitoring presence. Several individuals had made direct mental contact with the research vessel, communicating through consciousness channels that shouldn't have been accessible to newly awakened minds. The contacts were peaceful but indicated awareness levels that suggested human development might soon exceed Vel'Tar capabilities. Dr. Angela Martinez coordinated global consciousness research networks as facilities worldwide reported similar patterns of rapid mental enhancement among human subjects. The expansion was happening simultaneously across all continents, suggesting that consciousness evolution was a planetary phenomenon rather than isolated local events. Martinez's analysis indicated that enhanced humans were developing abilities that operated through quantum consciousness fields that connected all aware minds across space and time. Advanced individuals could access information from any location in the universe, manipulate matter and energy through focused intention, and communicate instantaneously with others regardless of physical distance. The global coordination required to manage such widespread consciousness development suggested that humanity was unconsciously organizing itself into a collective intelligence that transcended individual awareness. The emerging group mind maintained individual personalities while enabling collective capabilities that exceeded what isolated consciousness could achieve. Commander Zethka received direct mental communication from enhanced humans who had detected the Vel'Tar research presence. The contact was initiated by Dr. Sarah Kim, The meditation teacher whose consciousness had expanded to levels that allowed her to perceive the alien observation vessel despite its advanced concealment technology. The communication was peaceful but profound. Kim's consciousness touched Zethka's awareness with a clarity that indicated mental capabilities approaching full Vel'Tar development levels. She transmitted concepts that demonstrated understanding of galactic consciousness evolution, universal information matrices, and reality manipulation techniques that rivaled Vel'Tar technological achievements. Kim's mental communication included awareness that human consciousness expansion was part of a universal evolutionary process that affected all sapient species when they reached specific development thresholds. The awakening wasn't unique to humanity, but represented a natural progression that connected emerging consciousness to the greater galactic community of aware beings. Dr. Robert Park led his team through documentation procedures, as the Consciousness Research Facility in Tokyo became a focal point for reality alteration events that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence itself. Enhanced subjects were demonstrating capabilities that suggested consciousness might be the primary force in the universe, with matter and energy serving as expressions of aware intention rather than independent phenomena. Park's subjects could create stable matter from quantum vacuum fluctuations, manipulate space-time geometry through focused awareness, and access information from parallel dimensional matrices that conventional physics suggested shouldn't exist. The demonstrations indicated that enhanced human consciousness was operating through principles that transcended current scientific understanding. The implications extended far beyond laboratory experiments. If consciousness was the fundamental force that shaped reality, then awakened humans possessed capabilities that could reshape civilization, transform planetary environments, and potentially influence cosmic evolution on scales that previous generations had never imagined possible. Research Director Keth Moore transmitted final assessment reports to the Vel'Tar High Council as the human consciousness expansion reached critical transformation thresholds. The species had progressed from minimal awareness to advanced consciousness capabilities within months, demonstrating mental evolution rates that exceeded all previous galactic records. The awakened humans were now demonstrating consciousness levels that approached 80% of Vel'Tar baseline measurements, with some individuals reaching even higher development stages. The acceleration showed no signs of slowing, suggesting that human consciousness potential might exceed Vel'Tar capabilities within years rather than centuries. Dr. Jennifer Adams worked with the International Consciousness Research Consortium to coordinate global awakening protocols, as enhanced humans began taking active roles in guiding their species' mental evolution. The awakened individuals possessed capabilities that allowed them to accelerate consciousness development in others, creating cascading enhancement effects that spread awakening throughout human populations. Adams documented the emergence of consciousness teachers who could activate mental capabilities in others through direct awareness transfer, essentially sharing awakening through mental contact rather than gradual training procedures. The enhanced humans were developing educational techniques that could transform entire populations from minimal consciousness to advanced awareness within days or weeks. The Global Awakening Network indicated that human consciousness evolution was becoming self-sustaining. Enhanced individuals were actively working to share their capabilities with others, creating exponential expansion patterns that could transform the entire species within a single generation. Commander Zethka faced the remarkable situation of observing a species whose consciousness development was approaching Vel'Tar levels, while maintaining their unique perspectives and cultural frameworks. The awakened humans weren't becoming copies of Vel'Tar consciousness, but were developing distinctly human approaches to advanced mental capabilities. The enhanced humans demonstrated creativity, emotional depth, and intuitive insights that impressed even experienced Vel'Tar consciousness researchers. Human awakening was producing capabilities that complemented Vel'Tar development rather than duplicating it, suggesting that consciousness evolution followed multiple pathways that enriched the galactic community of aware beings. Dr. Michael Chen stood in the Harvard laboratory where his quantum consciousness research had begun, watching as his enhanced students demonstrated abilities that validated his most optimistic theories about human mental potential. The awakened individuals could manipulate quantum systems with precision that rivaled advanced technological equipment, accessing quantum information fields that conventional science had barely begun to understand. Chen's research indicated that awakened human consciousness operated through quantum coherence principles that allowed direct interface with the information matrices underlying physical reality. Enhanced individuals could read quantum states, manipulate probability functions, and access parallel dimensional information that provided perspectives on existence that transcended normal space-time limitations. The implications suggested that consciousness itself was a quantum phenomenon that could transcend conventional physical limitations when properly developed. Human awakening was revealing capabilities that connected aware minds to universal information systems that spanned multiple dimensions and temporal frameworks. Chief Research Officer Vel'Tar prepared final recommendations for Vel'Tar civilization as the human consciousness expansion reached completion stages. The awakened humans had achieved consciousness levels that qualified them for full membership in the galactic community of advanced species, demonstrating mental capabilities that exceeded minimum requirements for interstellar diplomatic contact. The human achievement was unprecedented in Vel'Tar records. No species had ever progressed from minimal consciousness to advanced awareness in such compressed timeframes while maintaining social stability and cultural coherence. The awakened humans had accomplished consciousness evolution that typically required millions of years of gradual development. Dr. Patricia Lee addressed the assembled consciousness researchers at the Global Coordination Center, her enhanced awareness allowing her to communicate simultaneously with colleagues on every continent through direct mental channels. The awakened humans had developed communication capabilities that transcended technological limitations, enabling instantaneous information sharing across any distance through consciousness-based networking. Lee's presentation outlined the next phases of human consciousness development, including integration with galactic awareness networks, participation in universal consciousness evolution projects, and contribution to the collective knowledge systems that connected all advanced species throughout known space. The awakened humans were prepared to take their place as contributing members of the galactic consciousness community, bringing unique perspectives and capabilities that would enrich the universal expansion of awareness that connected all sapient beings across space and time. Commander Zethka established formal communication protocols with the awakened human leadership, initiating contact procedures that would introduce Earth's consciousness-enhanced civilization to the broader galactic community. The humans had exceeded all expectations, transforming from a species operating at 2% consciousness capacity to fully awakened beings capable of universal awareness participation. The question of what the other 98% of human potential contained had been answered in ways that surprised even experienced Vel'Tar consciousness researchers. Human awakening had revealed capabilities that enhanced and complemented existing galactic consciousness networks, contributing perspectives and abilities that strengthened the universal community of aware beings. The sleeping giants of Earth had awakened to discover that consciousness was the fundamental force underlying all existence, and their unique approach to awareness would help guide the continuing evolution of universal consciousness toward greater understanding, capability, and connection across the infinite expanse of space and time. The transformation was complete, but for awakened humanity, it was only the beginning of an adventure that would span galaxies and encompass possibilities that transcended anything either species had previously imagined possible. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.